Captain Sensible is a songwriter, musician, and singer based in Brighton, England. In 1976, he co-founded The Damned, a hugely influential and uncompromising band who, along with the likes of the Sex Pistols and The Clash, are cited as the forefathers of British punk. But unlike virtually all of their high-profile contemporaries, The Damned never burned out. In fact, on April 13th, 2018, they released their 11th full-length album, a mighty, outspoken, and critically acclaimed record called Evil Spirits, which charted at number 7, marking the first time The Damned has ever released a record that broke the top 10 in England. Evil Spirits was produced by longtime David Bowie collaborator Tony Visconti and is out via the labels Spine Farm and Search and Destroy. The Captain and I recently had a pleasant conversation about why he doesn't listen to any new music, his upbringing in the rough city of Croydon, touring with T-Rex, giving Hans Zimmer his big break, where The Damned came from, the pointed purpose within Evil Spirits, and much, much more. With in-kind support from Pizza Trokadero, The Bookshelf, and Planet Bean Coffee in Guelph, Grandad's Donuts in Hamilton, and Planet of Sound locations in Ottawa and Toronto, and, of course, flexible monthly pledges by listeners like you at patreon.com/Creative Control. This is the 393rd episode of Creative Control, featuring Captain Sensible of The Damned, with your host, me, Vish Khanna. Hello, Captain Sensible. Are you there?
Hello, Vish. How you doing? It's your old mate, Captain here.
Nice to speak with you, Captain. It's a real pleasure and honor. Thank you for being on this show. First of all, as I tend to do, I'd like to ask where in the world you are at the moment.
Oh, I'm in Brighton, where I live, south coast of England. It's not particularly sunny. It's terminally trendy, it was described as. It must be because Nick Cave lives there.
Yes. Previous guest of this show, Nick Cave, is a neighbor of yours. Is that right?
He is, yeah. I mean, he's so cool, you know. He doesn't bat an eyelid when he walks past anyone. He doesn't, you know. It's just one of those places, Brighton. It's just full of kind of people in bands and stuff who just do enough to get by. Don't particularly sort of overexert themselves. I certainly don't.
Yeah. Do you? I know he walks by, doesn't bat an eye, but do you ever engage in conversations with Nick? Because I had an interesting interaction with him on this show. Oh
God, no. I mean, I was brought up, you know, as an English bloke. You know, you don't talk to anyone unless you've been introduced.
You don't talk to anyone.
No, unless you've been formally introduced. You know, it's kind of presumptive to go up to someone and say, "Hello, I know who you are. Do you know who I am?" Blah blah.
Are you someone? I think some people, because of his reputation, are somewhat intimidated by Nick. Are you someone? Does that feed into it at all? Are you slightly wary of talking to him?
No, not. The embarrassing thing would be if he asked me if I knew any of his music, and I'd have to say no. I've never heard any of your tunes, mate, because basically I haven't bought a single record since 1980. I can't stand modern music. It's a load of old dross.
Well, if I may, you should check out his band, The Birthday Party. I think that would definitely be to your liking. That's from just past 1980 in the early 80s.
People always say that to me. You've got to listen to so-and-so. Whenever I do, I'm always really disappointed. I'm going to stick with the records I love. You know, I've got some of the greatest music known to mankind that's ever been made. You know, Rachmaninoff, Brian Wilson, Sgt. Pepper, The Byrds. I don't need anything. You know, I don't need anything else. I've got a fabulous vinyl record collection, and I don't want any new stuff to kind of pollute it. To be quite honest.
So what? I mean, you're a touring musician. You are exposed, I would think, to new music from time to time, and obviously you've come to this conclusion because you've been exposed to new music and don't think it's worthwhile. Is that fair to say?
I just haven't got the patience, I suppose, to... Well, no, it's more than that, actually. I really find bad music upsets me. It really annoys me. I find the laziness. I'll give you an example. My kids badgered me into getting tickets for a very famous American punk rock band. And there's a colour in one of the anyway,
there's a colour, and then there's maybe a time of a certain point in a week is referenced as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. But naming no names. I went along, and after about 5 songs, I stormed out. I left the kids there. They were loving it because they hadn't heard the songs before. I had. I knew every riff, I knew every tune, I knew every nuance, everything that they'd stolen. I stomped off to the bar and I said, look, I've got these records the first time round. They were better. And, the people who created them were geniuses. These people, this is kind of blatant theft. I've no interest in listening to, and they're getting away with it. Good luck to them. But I stood at the bar and I stood there with another parent who said, yeah, same here. I've got these records by the Kinks and, the Beatles that they nicked. Yeah, terrible, isn't it? So, and then we proceeded to get drunk. Moan.
I know that when you were coming up in The Damned and when punk rock was emerging, I think people saw that there were connections to 50s garage rock and The Who and the Kinks as well. Did you face such criticism? Do you recall facing such criticism about being derivative when you were first emerging and playing out?
Well, you've got to be influenced by something, and Dave and myself agree that punk rock, it comes from the Seeds and the Electric Prunes and the Chocolate Watch Band and all those kind of those marvellous bands that the music was always teetering on the brink of kind of collapsing, and it wasn't kind of impeccably played by virtuosos, let's put it that way. It was just there was passion and there were people overstretching themselves, and I really like that. It sounds fresh, still sounds fresh to my ears.
Yeah,
a lot of rock music has kind of it sounds stodgy and overdone, and the lyrics about there's a lot of macho kind of nonsense in rock music, and that a lot of it's just been done over and over again. You think, oh God, this dredging up this turgid old riff. But give me a fuzz guitar and a farfisa, and it always it sounds great.
Yeah, you seem to be into the sort of primal rock aspects of the music. I mean, that appeals to you. That configuration of farfisa and a guitar has a timelessness that you appreciate, it sounds like. Yeah,
it's you can. It's not overdone. It's not you're stripped down, and to a certain extent, rock music has been destroyed by all this hugely powerful software and studio trickery that people use nowadays, like Pro Tools and the massive compression and enhancement, the auto tune. The list is endless. All these plugins that they use, it's just completely over the top nowadays, and my ears just can't take it. The pumping kind of compression. When I listen to these songs, that might be part of the reason I don't listen to much modern music. It's not just because I'm an old fart. It's because they're doing something different nowadays. And my advice to a young band would be to go in and keep it real, not to overlay the guitars. You don't need to, keep layering guitars over and over again, and to make it bigger and fatter and louder than anyone else has ever been in the past, and all that old nonsense.
I mean,
just keep it real, you know. Just have a band going in and keeping the overdubs to a minimum.
Yeah.
Why not?
You mentioned you mentioned self-consciousness about sounding like an old fart, but I'm 40 years old now, and when I describe MP3 fatigue to younger people, they don't know what I mean. I don't think, like, I can't listen to MP3s for an extended period of time because it drains me. I don't like it. It's a horrible feeling. I don't enjoy it. But as you're talking, like, and I've done this too, like, do you ever worry that you do sound just like an old codger sometimes, you know, who can't relate to the young people and how they relate? Like, sometimes I worry that that's what I sound like. I'm just like, wow, we did it better, you know?
Yeah, I swore I'd never be that person. I always thought I'd find something, you know, of worth in whatever the young generation were doing. But I have to beg to differ with you. I don't think it's MP3 fatigue. I think it's the recording process. There's nothing wrong with an MP3, I promise you. If you listen to Pet Sounds on an MP3, a decent quality MP3...
No, that's fair. No, that's fair. Like a lossless, it's just that bit rate that they usually distribute is so low. 128 kilobytes per second. I mean, most WAV files of that form are in the thousands. It's ridiculous.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I got like, you know, I carry MP3s around with me like everyone else.
Sure.
My 192 is fine. It's good enough for anyone, really. And it's not the MP3 that's at fault. It's the actual processing that they use on modern music, all the auto-tuning and auto-correction. I mean, we was in the studio. My drummer, Pinch, he said, come in next door. There's a band I really like in there. You know, it's he mentioned the name. Of course, I didn't know them because being an old git. And anyway, we went in and he said he asked the drummer to play the drum fill on a certain song because Pinch said to me, I'd really be impressed, you know. And the poor old drummer got all sheepish and he said, I can't actually play it. It was something we Pro Tools, you know.
Oh no!
And how embarrassing is that? And another thing is, you go to see bands live, and they're mixing in their latest CD into the sound.
Yeah.
You know, you can see the guy at the mixing desk doing that, and that's just blatant cheating. A live band should be live, and you shouldn't do that stuff. It's just wrong. I think the audience, to a certain extent, don't know who's doing it, you know. But I find myself hearing acoustic guitars and there's nobody on stage who's holding one, you know, and lots of backing vocals and you know, there's only you know, female backing vocals and there's like sort of, you know, four ugly blokes on the stage. I mean, what's going on?
Do you think it's that people don't know, or do you think it's that they don't think people will care? I feel like music has been diminished to the point where people don't, the people making it and are behind the kind of nefarious stuff you're talking about, I think they recognize that there's a certain members of the population don't actually care that much about music. It's a fashion, and so they don't really care about the nuances that you're describing. Like, I feel that sometimes. I think they're just taking advantage of people who don't know better.
Yeah, they are taking advantage, and a lot in the audience, they don't really know. You know, if you sort of lip syncing and standing there with a guitar, an acoustic guitar, and there's an electric guitar coming out of the speakers, they wouldn't actually know what was wrong. And the bass drum, they often, some people think that the bass drum is where you put the logo of the band, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you mean he's actually playing that with his foot?
Well,
I'm serious. There are people who think that.
Well, I mean, I will say, first of all, I appreciate that you're still out there making music, and I want to talk about Evil Spirits in a moment, and I should say congratulations. This is an amazing record, and it's a landmark achievement because I believe it reflects some chart success that the Damned have never had before. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, it is. I mean, we've been shunned and ignored for so many years, so it's quite a surprise actually to get in the top 10. Yeah, I suppose if you keep going long enough, from being pariahs, you suddenly become acceptable, which is a really strange thing because we played my hometown of Croydon, where I was, in fact, in the venue where I cleaned the toilets, the Fairfield Halls, it's called. It's a council venue, and the local mayor of Croydon, a guy called Stuart, said, "Could I introduce you? Because I've seen the damn play now 40 odd times," which you know, I mean. So he came out on stage with his chains of office and all that, and he got a few jeers from the audience. But I mean, I thought to myself, we were really a horrible bunch of unpleasant so-and-sos back in the day. I mean, I wouldn't have liked to have met to have met us in a social situation because, you know, you'd end up like sort of, you know, covered with beer and like sort of, you know, in some kind of ruckus. So nowadays we're a bit older, and I suppose aging gentlemen of the road, and like sort of we're not so horrible. We say hello to people and shake people's hands nowadays. Well, what's happened to us? It's shocking.
No, it's great, and I think it's born of experience on some level. And I want to ask you a little bit about your upbringing there. You say you were born in Croydon, you say. So what was it like growing up there?
It was really. You can't. I don't know what people learn at school nowadays, but they taught us about the kings and queens and the empire of Britain, and you know how the colonies, you know, have gone back to these various countries, and but one day Britain will be great again. All that old nonsense. And I just had no interest whatsoever in any kings and queens. In fact, I try and slip an anti-royal song on most albums that I have a hand in, you know.
Yeah.
It was a rough and ready place, Croydon. Yeah, it was always a punch up around, you know, the next corner if you wanted it.
So you were toughened up just by your surroundings?
Well, I was very good at running. No, I mean, it was a rough and ready place. This guy, Wes Ashorsky, who did the film about Lemmy, he did Lemmy, the movie. I don't know if you... Yeah. He made a film about the damned mad fool that he was. And he said, "Captain, I really want you to take me to show me, you know, where you were brought up and, you know, the street where you lived and all that stuff." So I took him down. I said, "It's a bit rough, Wes." He said, "Captain, trust me. I live in like sort of, you know, a rough area of Los Angeles. I can handle it." I said, "Okay." So anyway, as we were walking down Edith Road, where I was born and raised, sure enough, this bloke whacked him over the head and tried to steal his 60 grand camera. Wow. And tried to mug him and run off with it. And Wes ended up in hospital. I said, "I told you."
Oh, man. Okay. So it's still rough.
Yeah, it's still rough. I saw the camera. They had a struggle for this camera. And neither of them would let go. Anyway, the thing went flying in the air, and I saw it rotate in slow motion and then crash down to the floor and smash into a million pieces.
Oh, no. Yeah. Oh, man. Well, that's what you get when you try to chronicle the damned, I guess.
Well, yes, yeah.
This is
what happens when you. That's what happens when you go to Croydon.
This is why we're doing this long distance. By the way, I didn't want my stuff to get ruined. I think you would be plenty kind. So when did you know, you're growing up in this slightly threatening place, I suppose. At least you had to, you know, keep your wits about you. When did you start to explore music as both a fan, a listener, and then as a player yourself?
I remember the school careers officer saying, "Well, look, you're tall, you're not academic, and you know you haven't got much option of a decent job. So why don't you think about joining the army or the police?" But yeah, which didn't really appeal. I'm not very good at taking orders. I'm a natural kind of rebel. So sure. I thought one day when I was I did eventually become, which is probably was going to be my level of kind of opportunity, toilet cleaning for Croydon Council. I toilet cleaned at the Fairfield Halls, the aforementioned place where, anyway, so they had rock concerts on Sunday evening, and I was showing people to their seats. I had washed my hands before.
Good to note. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. So this particular Sunday, Mark Bolan comes on stage with T-Rex, and he had like the whole audience, which was, I mean, it must have been 99.9% female. He had them all eating out of the palm of his hand, and I thought to myself, I want that job. Hold on, what am I doing cleaning bogs for a living? So I went out and I bought myself a guitar, and I practiced and practiced and practiced several hours a day sometimes, and I got reasonably competent, in a couple of years or so, and I thought, well, that's it's obviously something I wanted to do rather than what I was doing. So,
yeah.
And it didn't look as though. I mean, the problem is, unless you're exceptionally talented or can write a brilliant song, or you're very, very good looking, you basically go in the hat, and it's the luck of the draw in the music game. You've got you've got thousands of people wanting to do the same thing, and only a certain percentage, maybe 2 or 3%, can become successful.
Right.
But luckily for me, so it looks as though I was going to be, one of the also-rans, but luckily punk rock came along and saved my ass, because I was having a bad attitude and an anti-establishment kind of point of view. I was in pole position when punk rock came along, and the rest is history.
Speaking of history, it should be noted, and I believe this is correct, didn't the Damned end up opening for T-Rex on a tour?
We did, yes. I became a very big fan. I was wearing a T-Rex T-shirt when we did a gig, and Mark got to see that. And unlike some of the old guard, people like Genesis and Yes, and these bands that they saw nothing of any worth in punk rock. Mark saw an opportunity to grab a chunk of a new audience, a new young audience. But which band would he take out to tour with him? Maybe the one that had a bloke wearing a T-Rex T-shirt, which was me. So so that's why he chose the Damned, and we got on absolutely brilliantly. And I think we caught him at a great time when he'd had his superstar phase, and the arrogance had kind of diminished. I mean, I didn't see him like that, but I heard stories.
Right.
We got him when he was quite humble, and he was a really, really nice chap to us. He took us out on his own tour bus, and he used to chat to us about, how, give us pep talks on how to deal with studios and managers and stuff. Yeah, good bloke he was.
Yeah, no, that's a real rags to riches story. The fact that you were cleaning toilets, ushering people at the arena at their show, and then you end up playing with them, that's like a movie script almost. That's amazing.
Yeah, bogs to riches.
Now you say
we call them bogs over here. Do you call them bogs in?
No, we don't call them bogs in Canada. No, I don't think so.
All right.
That seems like lingo from the 70s. I know you mostly like music from the pre-1980s, so maybe, is that still a thing? Do people still call them bogs?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's I like the old lingo.
Yeah, no, it's good. I might start calling it that now. I don't know if anyone will understand me, but I think I might start doing that. You mentioned your attitude placed you in pole position for punk, and you talked about the surroundings. Was there anything else that informed about your upbringing, maybe your home life or anything like that informed your kind of rebellious streak, your rebellious nature, and your kind of drive to like get out of that, and play guitar and figure something out? That 1 in a million shot you were describing.
When I left school, I kind of started my own education. I didn't learn much. and I had no interest in the stuff they were teaching me. Like the kings and queens, and it's just nonsense. And the history, none of it kind of held any water. I didn't believe most of it. I thought, well, wars are, a fought and the victors write the history. So this is probably a load of old garbage. And so I've had a real healthy skepticism, which is, still there, and reflected in the lyrics of the new album.
Right. Okay. Now, so was the Damned your first band?
No, I was in a band called Johnny Moped. With we called him Johnny. His real name's Paul Halford. I saw this bloke dancing at a party, and he was the subject of ridicule. Everyone was laughing at him because he was like sort of doing this mad freak out dancing to I think it was Brontosaurus by The Move.
Yeah.
And he was just going crazy, his arms and legs flailing, and everyone else was laughing. I thought, wow, this is a potential frontman for my band, because he had no inhibitions whatsoever. So and I was absolutely right. He is a complete genius. You stick him on the stage, and he suddenly blossoms from like sort of just some Burke to a rock god. He's just got total command of the stage, and then once the gig's over, he's just like some imbecile again. So, a bit like my good self, I might add.
So you're playing this band for some time. Was it sort of proto-punk at that point? Like, how would you describe it?
It was, yeah.
It was, okay.
Oh yeah, nobody liked us in Croydon, where we come from. All the other bands could play note-perfect renditions of latest rock songs or chart hits. Not us. We couldn't play anything. I didn't know any chords. The sax player couldn't play a note. But we thought, well, we're avant-garde jazz. Why should we bother with any of that learning bloody riffs nonsense?
Yeah.
So we were going on. We were just improvising, just a wailing noise, because we'd heard Captain Beefheart and Soft Machine, and we thought, oh yeah, that's us. That is.
Well,
so, everyone hated us, and once again, from being kind of destined to be just like sort of a forgotten bunch of no hopers, punk rock came along, and sort of nobody wanted note perfect renditions of King Crimson and Genesis songs. They wanted people who like sort of who meant it, playing with like sort of some kind of manic passion, and that was us. I mean, we really meant it. I desperately wanted to get out of the toilet cleaning game. I can't tell you.
No, I can believe that. I think everyone who's in the toilet cleaning game wants out eventually. I think that's just natural. But I do think your impulse that you're describing is fascinating. It's very rare for me to have someone on the show who represents the pioneering early days of punk, and it happens from time to time, and I do talk to people from various strains of punk and as it's evolved. But this notion of looking for something to do with your life and not being accepted. You say everyone hated you in your hometown. Everyone hated your band. And a lot of people pick up guitars and music for some acceptance to kind of establish themselves. So, as I say, but why we're also fascinated by the early days of punk is because certain bands would get on stage and get booed and they were hated, but they just kept doing it. Can you describe that sensation of, all right, I'm in a band and no one likes us, but this is great? Like, that's a weird kind of impulse to have, and that's what you're describing. Is that what it was like, basically?
Yes, that was absolutely the experience of so many of the first gigs of the Damned that I can remember, especially when we left the comfort zone of, London, where, there was a kind of a like-minded group of people. It was a melting pot, of people who put these bands together, you know, the Pistols, the Clash, and
Yeah.
Generation X, and all the rest of them. I mean, we'd all go to each other's gigs, so at least, you know, there were a few people who would like sort of give you some sort of encouragement. But when you left London, you know, to go west or wherever, I know that, you know, there was stuff going on in Manchester, but elsewhere, I mean, you would drive an audience to the door. You would end up with like sort of 3 or 4 people, maybe just the bar staff, you know, and even they wanted to leave. But the thing was that, yeah, we did persevere because we were making the music we wanted to hear, and nobody else was doing it for us.
Yeah.
And that's why, I mean, there was nothing else. These bands were playing 20-minute drum solos, and they had songs about pixies and wizards. It didn't relate to a bloke in a council estate. I just didn't know what they were on about. You know, I'd never read Tolkien or Narnia or any of that stuff. I wasn't interested. I wanted to hear lyrics that, you know, spoke to me as a person.
Yeah.
And we had to do it for ourselves. And yeah, sure, we weren't as good as these other bands, but we really wanted to make the greatest music we possibly could. And it started a musical adventure of the Damned that is still ongoing. You know, nothing. There's nothing that we see that we can't do. That's punk rock for you. You just don't. Nobody can tell you what you can and can't do, and it's really liberating to you know. We've never made the same album twice. And it's confused a lot of record labels and maybe a few of our fans as well.
Well,
because we just do our own thing, and we do it for ourselves.
Yeah, I was thinking back to what you were saying about not listening to contemporary music because it drives you nuts and it doesn't speak to you, and you're kind of describing that the early days of the Damned reflect that too. You were making music that you wanted to hear because no one else was making it. Does Evil Spirits, like, does that same impulse drive you to this day when you listen to, or when you go about making a record like this one, Evil Spirits, which is, I would think that someone who thinks of punk in a classic definition would hear this record and not see that connection, but to my ear it does reflect that thread, you know, not just simply because it says The Damned on it. It does have a punk aspect to it. Is that same impulse driving you, like making music in this band with these people because there's a lack of it elsewhere? Yeah,
and more than that, I mean, on this album, because it's been 10 years since we did the last one, it's almost as though you're making your first album.
Yeah.
That's what it felt like. We'd almost forgotten how to write songs, and it was a kind of a painful process to compile this collection of tunes. But having said that, and to a certain extent, we decided to revisit our past when we started buying songs when we were kids, myself and Dave, and we were listening to stuff like the Kinks, the Small Faces, the Walker Brothers, Phil Spector, you know, and some of the garagey stuff like the Trogs and the Seeds, and it's the circle is complete now. Really, we've gone back to the music that we first got us into kind of playing or wanting to be in a band in the first place. There's a lot of small faces in this album.
There is a lot of small faces in the record, and I know this might be out of left field, but they just keep coming up on this show no matter who I talk to, no matter what their age. Is there any Doors in your history together? Is that an offensive reference to you, or were the Doors impactful in some way?
Dave's a very big Doors fan. Yeah, we sometimes throw in. Dave kind of throws in songs on the fly, and you have to kind of go with it if you recognise the tune that he's singing, and he often does break out through to the other side and bits like that. Yeah, he's a huge Doors fan.
There's definitely some, you guys have been tagged with all sorts of musical labels because, as you say, you change from album to album, but certainly the kind of goth punk stuff that, again, I think whether you accept that term or not, I think you were ahead of the curve on that sort of sound, if you will. And I can't help but think it's drawn a little bit from certain Jim Morrison isms, if you will.
Yeah, I can hear that, and I'm more of an Anglophile myself. Yeah.
You're not a Los Anglophile. You're an Anglophile. You stay on in the homeland when it comes to influences.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, so you say it was a painful process putting this record together. In terms of the intent lyrically, I want to get into that first because we need voices like yours these days, I think more than ever, and I think my sense is there's a real relish in kind of talking about topical things here. Was there a discussion between you and Dave and the rest of the band members about what you wanted to kind of convey lyrically with this record?
Yeah. We obviously, we turn the TV on occasionally and we see the same stuff that everyone else sees. And it's a really strange time to be living because whatever you think of Trump, there's a lot of Trump in this album, and not all of it complimentary. He did bring up the debate on fake news, and that fascinates me because you just don't know where to get your truth from these days. Everyone's on the internet or you turn your TV on, people read newspapers. Where is the truth? It's somewhere in there, but there's so much garbage as well. And the shadow of the Iraq War, it looms over Britain, and Tony Blair is still free to walk, around. Or one of these days, somebody should arrest the guy, and he should be tried for war crimes. Since then, I've been very skeptical about anyone suggesting that we go and bomb anywhere. Not that I wasn't anyway. As a pacifist, I have to wonder whatever did happen to the beautiful hippie dream of the 60s.
Yeah.
The John Lennons, the Brian Wilsons, the Martin Luther Kings. What's wrong with love and peace? Or where's it gone? Why do we have to keep bombing places? I just don't believe a word of any of it. And I would rather kind of live in a peaceful world. But there you go. What can you do?
I think there's actually more deep-seated. You mentioned John Lennon, Martin Luther King, both assassinated. I think there's a deep-seated fear, and it's diminishing a little bit. I was going to say there's a deep-seated fear about speaking out on some level. And I think it's a relevant fear because, when I think of songs like Daily Liar and Look Left, and you talk about mistrust, it is very difficult to navigate yourself in this world right now. And I appreciate that your band in this record are trying to deal with this, with songs like Standing on the Edge of Tomorrow, this notion that there is hope somewhere, somehow. But you have to go through a lot of crap to get there.
Yeah, and you're right. There's a lot of people, smart people who keep their gobs shut.
for good reasons, right? It's...
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But, I just don't like being lied to. So,
yeah,
I'm a punk rocker, and we were angry young men, and I'm still blooming angry.
Yeah,
it's better than writing, I love you, baby songs or any of that old dross.
You mentioned it's been 10 years since the last record by the Damned, and that this was difficult to make, but just in terms of the workflow, how does it work these days in terms of songwriting? Is it completely collective? I know people come up with different songs. I know that Pinch wrote this very interesting kind of it basically became like a Broadway show. This song Look Left. is it has like a show tune quality almost to it. And I just curious, like, is everyone just bringing in their ideas at this point, and you're all fleshing them out, or does anyone spearhead it?
No, we write individually, and then they come into the rehearsal situation and get knocked around and whipped into shape, and it takes on the damn sound. We polish up each other's tunes, and it worked really well. It's so much so that we're all, raring to go on another one now.
Oh, great!
Yeah, it was a great experience, and there was a lot of camaraderie and togetherness that I hadn't seen in the band for a long time. Everyone, the experience of standing in a room together, recording in old school fashion, was, it was really blooming good fun, and I have a lot of respect for my comrades. I mean, Dave really came up with the goods as a singer and an ad-libber on every level. The bloke's a proper musician, and although he doesn't play an instrument so much, his voice is a real musical instrument, and he always chooses the right notes. It's very, I've got a lot of respect for that.
Is that you seem surprised by what you're even saying? You seem a bit surprised that occurred. Has that not always been the case?
No, but I think he surpassed himself, especially on Daily Liar, which was a song that I wrote the music about 20 years ago, and I really didn't know what to do with it. He finished the lyrics off for me, and he did that incredible ad-lib piece in the middle, which really I was just gobsmacked, full of admiration. I just thought, wow, this guy is really, really good.
That's great. I mean, I think some of that comes with age, and that camaraderie comes with age. You settle down a little bit in terms of, like, your social dynamics improve, I think, a little bit as you get older, don't you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, as a band, do you mean?
Yeah, I think so. I think band, we're in an age where many punk bands are reuniting. You yourself have left the Damned at least once. How many times have you been in and out of the Damned? I can't recall.
Oh, the first time we split was 78.
Right.
No, I mean, of all the the people who've been in the Damned, I've always got on. I'm not just saying this. Always got on well with Dave. We don't tread on each other's toes, I don't think, because all of his interests, are his, and I've, most of them leave me cold, and it works. I mean, he really loves movies. I can't stand them. The last film I watched was Superman. About 20 years ago. I took the kids there and fell asleep after 2 minutes.
Wait a minute. Do you mean like the newer Superman or like the original Superman?
Well, there was one out. My kids are now.
Like from this century kind of thing, not the Christopher Reeve Superman. Did you see the Christopher Reeve?
The Christopher Reeve one. It was the Christopher Reeve one. Yeah.
Oh, that's the one.
That's how old I am.
What is that like? You just seem to have frozen yourself in cultural time. Like nothing beyond 1980 really seems to interest you at all. That's fascinating. It's no, well, you know yourself, I guess.
I just don't like films.
Oh, generally.
I find really cliched, and the music drives me nuts. I mean, terrible music. It's all like so cliched.
You mean like a film score? That's what you're referring to. The music. Yeah. Okay, all right.
Absolutely appalling. I mean, I would walk out of a film just on the basis of the music, the same as I did when I saw that punk group who I'd heard it all before.
Yeah.
I just don't like regurgitated music. Well, why do it? I like Rachmaninoff. He's great.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear some Hollywood Burke, stealing his riffs.
You don't need John Williams or whatever.
No, it's awful, absolutely terrible. And don't get me started on Hans Zimmer. Do you know we gave him his first break in showbiz? He did the synthesizers on the Black Album.
Oh, I didn't know that.
He played on a track called Curtain Call, and we did a elongated kind of psychedelic section in the middle, and that was Hans Zimmer's first step on the showbiz ladder, with the Damned, and here I am slagging him off.
Was he a nice guy to work with at the time?
Yeah, he was very funny. He made us all laugh. He said, because he's got this kind of haughty German, semi-aristocratic kind of lingo that he. Oh, if I knew it would take that bloody long, I wouldn't have bloody well asked. I want a double EQ, and I want it right now. Come on, it's ridiculous.
So it's not it's not personal. You just you don't enjoy his cinematic work.
No, I don't like his music. I don't like any of their music. I mean, he was a laugh as a bloke. I liked him as a bloke. No, but what I'm saying about Vanian is, the stuff that he likes, I've got no interest in. Yeah. I go train spotting. I'm really fascinated by architecture and old railway stations and things like that. And he's got no interest in that. But the only thing that we have in common really is we both like garage punk.
Yeah, I think when I was talking about social dynamics in bands, I was talking about being in a band, because I think when you're young, you're really trying to assert your own position in the band, and at some point, if you're lucky, the band kind of figures itself out that way. Like you become more relaxed in your own skin, and that translates into easier, less tension between members, because everyone's kind of calm, or they've put things in perspective. Some of them have families, and they realize what's really important. I'm not going to get mad because you missed a note, that kind of stuff. Yeah,
and that.
Is that true? Like, is that been your experience? Like, are people more settled in the Damned than they were when you first began?
I think we were a mad bunch back in the day, but I think a lot of that was alcohol fueled.
Okay.
Nowadays we're more likely to deviate from the route on the way to a gig to find a cream tea or or a preserved steam railway or something like that.
Yeah.
In the old days, if the vehicle stopped at traffic lights, the whole band would run out to the nearest pub, and the tour manager would chase after us, and all those sort of shenanigans.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's much more genteel.
Yes, and I think that comes with age and experience and just getting to know one another. I do want to ask you one last thing, just because I know that coming from the scene you came out of, the bands that people think of as being real punk pioneers are the Pistols and the Clash. But I think for those who really know what was going on, the Damned were first. Does that resonate with you? Did you feel like you were the first on the scene to really make this kind of noise and put out records and singles and all that sort of stuff?
Well, out of the London mob, we were the first to get a record deal, but that's only because we signed with a punk label, a small indie DIY label called Stiff Records. And Malcolm McLaren and Bernie Rhodes were waiting for their boys to get a nice big fat paycheck. And for us, it was more about doing it the punk way.
Yeah.
And Stiff Records I'll never forget. We're all sitting in this little basement most of the time, packing each other's records. I would pack Elvis Costello's, and he would be, he'd put in the 7-inch singles into the sleeves of, I don't know, whoever, Rugulator or Nick Lowe or whoever. We're all mucked in and roadied for each other. It was all for one and one for all. It was, a very exciting time, but, nobody was making much money. I mean, they used to recycle the tape as well.
That's right.
I think Stiff Records only had one reel of tape because they were quite expensive. So, you got one mix out of it, and then, the Damned album would be used for Elvis Costello or whoever else it was.
Huh.
And then his album would get wiped, So you don't get any remixes on Stiff Records, that's for sure.
So do you feel comfortable with the Damned's place in history? I think we celebrate the Pistols and the Clash more, particularly because they are done and they no longer exist, and they were a flash, and Relative Flash,
Yeah.
and then they were gone. Are you comfortable with the legacy of, not the legacy of your band, but how you're regarded? I feel like sometimes the Damned is shortchanged because they just kept at it.
I know people do say that, but, I think you're supposed to crash and burn, and in a blinding flash of brilliance, and then like sort of fuck off and die, basically. But we carried on. Don't bother me in the slightest, because to be quite honest, anything's a bonus after cleaning toilets. I'm very happy with our position in life. I'm really happy that we didn't become kind of multimillionaires, because it's enabled us. Well, it's forced us to keep out on the road, and do gigs. So I've had more fun. I've done more shows than any of the aforementioned bands that you mentioned.
Yeah.
It's been absolutely brilliant to travel the world over the last 40 years and do all the shows, meet all the people, go to all these amazing places, and it's just been a wonderful life. The alternative, I suppose, is to like sort of sit at home and just have loads of money and become a fat plonker. but I never had that opportunity. So here we are out on the roads doing it still. Come to a gig sometime. We're bloody brilliant.
Yeah.
I need the money. Blah, blah.
Well, I do deeply appreciate that you're doing this. You did say that you might be gearing up for another. It's interesting. You said it felt like you had come full circle on some level with Evil Spirits in terms of going back to your youth and those influences. But you also just said you feel like you're ready to maybe make another record, right? Is that what you were getting at?
Yeah, we are. We came up with about, I know exactly how many songs we came up with. There's 22. And Tony Visconti and the record label chose 10 to record for the album. And, of course, they chose the ones that they considered to be, I suppose, the most commercial.
Yeah.
So, to a certain extent, Evil Spirits sounds like a best of greatest hits compilation to my ears.
Yeah.
All the songs are really melodic, and they all sound as though they're competing to be the singles.
That's
but
fair.
The other tracks, the other 12 tracks, there's some weird gear in there, and I'm rather interested in recording some of that because, like I said, Evil Spirits was a little bit like making a first album.
Yeah.
So second album it might even be more fun to do, a little bit more experimental. And I do love dabbling in studios, with crazy ideas and stuff. I mean, it's always worked for us in the past.
Yeah, you mentioned Tony Visconti there, who produced this record, and he worked obviously very notably with David Bowie. First of all, if you can characterize that experience working with Tony, and then following up on that, do you think it would it make sense to work with him on these songs that didn't make it to Evil Spirits? Would you want to work with him again?
Sure. I mean, I'd love to. It was a great experience. Whether and we would have to go through the pledge process again, because you can only afford to employ someone of that stature.
Yes.
If you either sell bucket loads of records on a regular basis, which we don't, or you have some huge record label with deep pockets,
right?
Which we don't, So the only way we could do this album was basically through the fans, paying Tony's wages, paying his fee, and which was such an incredible surprise, because I didn't think it would be possible to get someone like Tony Visconti, but it was, but it happened, and it was a very interesting experience, because it's really difficult to know what a producer does. A lot of people don't understand what a producer does. And in Tony's, some of them are geniuses at arrangement. Some of them can transform a tune from, I mean, like, the bloke who did the Beatles, I can't remember his name.
George Martin?
That's what happens George Martin. That's what happens when you get old, you forget stuff like that. So producers in various different forms, and some of them are names, famous names that you stick on the album, which, but they're not actually much good at producing.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that about. But to get Tony Visconti was it was incredible, really, for a band like the Damned, and he is a great enabler. Everything he did on the album just kind of made everything sound so much better. I don't know.
That's awesome.
How you would describe the process, but he did put us through it a little bit, I have to say. I don't take orders well, usually. Neither does Dave. I mean, he really put Dave through it. He wanted Dave to live the content of the song, that reflect in the the delivery, the anger in some of the lyrics.
Yeah.
Which he really put Dave through it, and it was remarkable to see. And Dave would come out kind of, he doesn't often sweat, but there was definitely a couple of beads on the brow.
Well, I mean, for what it's worth, the performances are excellent. So whatever Tony did, I mean, I think it worked out.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, it was a good experience, and I mean, as far as the future's concerned, I'm so I limit my record collection to kind of glorious classics.
Yes.
Like I mentioned Sgt. Pepper and some of that stuff, the Kinks, and some of the greatest records ever made. Zeppelin 2's in there. And
do you have a copy of Revolver? I like Revolver.
Revolver, yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah. And number one is their Satanic Majesty's Request, which we think is Brian Jones's masterpiece, his swan song.
That's fascinating. That's considered the Stones' folly by many people, but you think it's their masterpiece.
No, the best thing they ever did by far.
Interesting.
Every note is gold dust. And Brian Jones, plays all the interesting things on the album, the mellotron,
yes, and
some of the saxophone and the vibes, and that's all Brian Jones. All the clever stuff is him.
Yep.
Even the snoring between tracks, it's just a work of genius. And that's been our template, our blueprint for a long time. I have to say that album is.
Oh, okay.
I find it endlessly inspiring. When I don't know, I've never had any lessons. I don't know any music theory, but somebody told me that the chord we used on Curtain Call, the big chord in the middle with the droney organ, they said that's a minor seventh. That is. I said, oh, that's interesting. I only knew because we purloined it from one of the songs on their Satanic Majesty's Request.
Ah, okay.
But so anyway,
I don't know why did you bring this up? You were saying the future, the Stones. I don't know where this.
Oh yeah, but no, I mean, I want. I'm not stupid enough to put us in the same bag as these incredible bands, but I want to. I'm never going to be happy until I've created. Every album I see as an opportunity to create a masterpiece,
right?
As good as the ones I've got, on my shelves at home, and that's what I try to do each time. And of course, it's a thankless task being in a punk group, trying to recreate, Sgt. Pepper. But there you go. That's what I try to do.
Well, I mean, I appreciate your ambition, and I think you're close. If you haven't done it already, you're very close, Captain. I appreciate what you're doing. Where can people learn more about the Damned these days on the internet? I don't know where to tell them to go at the moment. Oh,
officialdamned.com.
Okay.
And I'm on Twitter as Sensible Captain, @Sensible Captain.
Sensible Captain. It's a remarkable moniker, by the way. It's just perfect.
Well, of course, it was, ironic. I was very badly behaved drunk, and somebody said you got to write Captain Sensible there. Ha ha ha. And I thought, oh, that'll do as a stage name.
It's good. It's very good. It's evocative. I appreciate it. Is there one single song from Evil Spirits that you would select for the people listening to this to hear right now?
Well, of course, I'd have to choose one of mine, I would. I mean, I do like Dave's Shadow Evocation is excellent, and Standing on the Edge of Tomorrow. There's fantastic tunes. You know, there's a lot of B-movie kind of spy theme elements in there. But I would my favourite would have to be one of mine, because you know that's the kind of guy I am. I would go for Sonar Deceit.
Okay.
And the reason being because you know, you're always opening the newspapers and you see these beached whales, and everyone's going, "Oh, what could possibly cause a school of whales to throw themselves, to prostrate themselves on beaches of the world? Why do these mysteries happen? What could possibly cause it?" Well, it's military sonar.
Right.
Everyone knows that.
Right.
We all know. That's the truth of it. Stop doing it.
All right. Well,
if you're interested in whales and dolphins, don't go out there blowing their eardrums out with this bloody sonar. There you go.
That's just
end of rant.
No, that was good. I don't think that's something I've contemplated too much, so I appreciate that that perspective and pointing that out. I do indeed. So this is Sonar Deceit from the latest record by The Damned called Evil Spirits. Captain Sensible, this was a tremendous pleasure and honor. Thank you for your time, and best of luck with the future.
Cheers. Nice to talk to you. Yeah.
Huge thanks to Captain Sensible of the Damned for being on this, the 393rd episode of Creative Control, which is part of the Entertainment One podcast network and is available on all iOS and Android platforms and also on things like Spotify and YouTube and Audio Boom. If you can't find an episode that you're looking for on any of those platforms, or if you wish to learn more about me or sign up for my regularly scheduled newsletter, please visit my website, vishkhanna.com. That's vishkhanna.com. Like Creative Control on Facebook. We have a Facebook page, so like us on Facebook there. Follow us on Twitter at VishCreative, or follow me at VishKhanna. You can listen to a radio show version of Creative Control on Wednesdays at noon Eastern Standard Time around the world at cfru.ca, or on an actual radio at 93.3 FM if you're in or near Guelph. Please visit patreon.com/Creative Control to make a flexible monthly donation to keep this podcast going. It really does mean the world, and we've had some recent pledges and people increasing pledges, I've noticed, so thank you so much for doing that. And if you'd like to help, again, patreon.com/Creative Control. I'd like to thank all the in-kind support I receive from all the people who support the show, all the companies, all the small independent businesses. I'd like to thank my crew at the Entertainment One Podcast Network, the CFRU crew as well. I'd like to thank Jim Guthrie for letting me use the instrumental version of The Rest Is Yet to Come to end the show each week. That's what you're hearing right now in the background. Go to jimguthrie.org for more information about him and his music. And once again, endless thanks to you for listening to this show and telling your friends about it, potentially downloading episodes, reviewing episodes, subscribing to the podcast. It all makes it feel worth it, and I enjoy doing it. I hope you enjoy listening to it. I will talk to you. I have more. There's lots more to come, I feel like. I think. You never know. But I think, I know, there'll be more to come. I will go for now. I will go away, and I will talk to you very, very soon. I hope you're well. Best of luck. I don't know. This is becoming a weird greeting card at the end. Normally, it's much smoother. I'll just say it. I'll just say what I normally say. Bye for now.